Hey, what's going on, everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of the Alec Walt Show. I'm your host, Alec Walt, alongside another very special guest, and today we're talking about the Washington Capitals. Yes, the NHL playoffs starts tomorrow with a huge series between the Capitals and the Boston Bruins, and to help us preview that series, the pregame and postgame broadcaster for the Washington Capitals, Ben Raby. Ben, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me.
Good to be here, Alec, and looking forward to what we like to call big boy hockey between the Capitals and the Bruins. This should be fun.
You said it right there. I mean, you've watched plenty of these two teams match up this year, obviously with the new schedule, and the easiest way to say it is these two teams do not like each other heading into this matchup.
No, I'd like to think there's a respect factor between the two of them, but certainly there's been some animosity and some nastiness throughout this regular season series, no question. And, having met 8 times this season, I think we'll discount the regular season finale when so many regulars were unavailable. But what I'm getting at, though, Alec, is even though they've played each other 8 times, I think the Boston Bruins, objectively speaking, a much different looking team since the trade deadline, not only the acquisitions that were brought in, of course, but also the fact that they're healthier. They're arguably as healthy as they've been all season, which for a Boston Bruins team, you can't ask for much more going into the postseason. The Capitals, it's a little bit of a different story here on the eve of Game 1.
Yeah, I was looking at your injury report. It was crazy because it seemed like all of your top players were, just returning, starting to skate. I mean, I know Oshie didn't. Kuznetsov, who knows where they're at. So what has happened to the Capitals towards the end of the year with all these injuries?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Alec. You go back to last Saturday night, so their next to last game of the regular season. And at one point, because TJ Oshie left that game early with the lower body injury, and he's still working his way back. There's no guarantee he's back tomorrow for Game 1. He has been on the ice this week, so that's encouraging. He's been practicing on a limited basis. But what I'm getting at, though, is that in the next to last game of the year, and a game when the Capitals had something at stake, they were still in line to potentially win the division, they were missing their entire number one power play unit, the whole optimal number one power play unit: Ovechkin, Karlsson, Kuznetsov, Backstrom, and Oshie. All 5 were out collectively. They combined to make north of $40 million. It was literally half of the Capitals' payroll just with those 5 unavailable and out of the lineup. Then you throw in, projected number one goalie, at least when the season began. Ilya Samsonov has also been unavailable. So yes, they were very shorthanded down the stretch, even because of salary cap restrictions. They weren't even able to dress in some games. They weren't able to dress 18 skaters. They were down a man to start a couple of games, start 3 games. They played with 17 players. So the good news, though, is that on the eve of the playoffs, they're starting to get a few guys back. Ovechkin played the regular season finale. John Karlsson, who missed the final 2 games, says he's good to go for the start of the playoffs. Oshie, I referenced, is inching closer to a return if he's not available for Game 1. Sounds like he'll be available at some point in this series. And then the head scratcher, the real question mark remains Kuznetsov and Samsonov. Samsonov, I don't think we even see in this series, and they're riding Vitek Vanacek, and Greg Anderson will suit up as the backup. But Kuznetsov's the real question mark here, Alec. That's a key cog when he's all in. He could be a difference maker, and hasn't been available for a week and a half now, and won't be available to start the series here for Washington.
So just looking at this depth from an offensive perspective, the Bruins added to Taylor Hall, stacked the second line. They have a very quality third line. How much of a difference how much is it going to hurt the Capitals going into this series, knowing the Bruins have the scoring depth when you don't have a top 6 forward in Kuznetsov there to secure that top 6, which is you expect to be productive on the other side?
Yeah, I think regardless of who the Capitals have available, just the fact that the Bruins finally have quite a bit of secondary scoring, which I know was lacking the first part of the season. That's a big reason why, of course, it was a priority come trade deadline. And look, the way Taylor Hall has complemented that, you've got the top line, and then the way he's gotten David Krejci going over the last month of the season, along with Craig Smith. That's a very formidable top 6, regardless of who is in or out of the Capitals lineup. I just look at what Boston has, and that's a handful. And, truthfully, Alec, I don't even necessarily look at who's in or who's not in for the Capitals top 6. I look at it more, the quote-unquote shutdown guys for the Capitals. They're available. They're healthy. Then they have a very good shutdown line. It's centered by Nick Dowd, lower down the depth chart, but a Nick Dowd, Carl Hagelin, Garnet Hathaway. Again, maybe not household names. Hagelin has been over the years, but that's a trio that I anticipate will be used in a lot of those defensive responsibility roles. They've handled that role fairly well throughout the regular season. But yeah, no question. There's as much firepower on the Bruins side as we've seen. And again, they're healthy, which they have not been for much of the year, as we know, going back a couple of weeks and a few months ago.
Yeah, I definitely want to thank your Capitals for smacking the Bruins the day before the deadline, because maybe that could made them be a little more aggressive in going after a Taylor Hall. But I mean, your Capitals were aggressive as well at the trade deadline. I mean, I was doing a podcast, doing like a trade deadline podcast with one of my buddies, and all of a sudden we look at our phone and see Anthony Mantha has been traded to the Capitals. Were you surprised that they went this approach at the deadline? And for the addition of Mantha, how has he fit into this Capitals team?
Well, regarding the surprise factor about the trade going back to the deadline, Jacob Vrana, it wasn't really working here in Washington. A guy in Vrana who was very well liked by the fan base, by teammates, etc. A very easy watch, a whole lot of high-end skill, a whole lot of speed, breakaway speed, a sniper, a goal scorer. Fans love that. The questions here were just about the quote-unquote 200-foot game, and Peter Laviolette had a mantra when he came here, you've got to play all three zones and you've got to be defensively responsible. And there were a lot of things away from the puck that weren't necessarily all there as far as Vrana was concerned. He was in and out of the lineup just before the trade deadline and sat out as a healthy scratch. So ultimately the decision was made. You move on from him. That being said, as far as the return, to get a top six forward in Anthony Mantha, another goal scorer, another guy who has term remaining on his contract. It's not a Taylor Hall. It's not a rental. This is somebody who is 3 years remaining on his deal. So, it was well received in that regard. And he's a big boy too, Anthony Mantha. He doesn't necessarily play physically, but he's a big boy, net front presence, hard to knock off the puck. And as of this recording, the plan is he's going to start game one, round one, riding shotgun with Ovechkin and Backstrom. And that's pretty good work if you could find it. He'll have to make the most of the opportunity and take advantage of it. He does enter the playoffs in a 9-game goalless drought, does Mantha, after he burst onto the scene right after the deal. So hopefully for him, he turns it around. He'll be chomping at the bit, his first NHL playoff experience. But so far, for the most part, the move has gone well from a Capitals perspective. But real quick, Alec, the thing is, Jacob Vrana, his previous 2 playoffs, big underachiever. He played 15 postseason games. 15 postseason games. He had no goals, no points. That's hard to do as a top 6 forward. Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. I didn't realize that.
It wasn't there. And now Anthony Mantha comes in, and you need more than just Alex Ovechkin and Nick Backstrom. And some of that secondary scoring among the headliners wasn't there last summer in the bubble, wasn't there the prior year against Carolina in round 1. They're looking for that, and they're looking to Anthony Mantha, among others, to fill that void.
So let's go to who's in net. I mean, obviously the Capitals have been kind of back and forth all season. It looks like Vitek Vanacek is going to be between the pipes in this opening series. I believe he's another young goaltender, never been in this type of situation. How confident are you knowing that he's going to be the guy between the pipes against one of the better offenses in the National Hockey League?
Yeah, I'll say with Vitek Vanacek, he at least put himself in position to have this opportunity, started the bulk of the games during the regular season, and going back to late January, early February, just for background and context here, Ilya Samsonov went on the COVID list. He tested positive for the coronavirus. He dealt with quite a few symptoms, did Samsonov, and he missed significant time. He missed about 6 weeks pretty early on in the season, and Vanacek was like thrust into the number 1 job. Keep in mind, Alec, this is a guy in Vanacek who was really number 3 in early December. You had Samsonov and you had Henrik Lundqvist. Vitek Vanacek was never supposed to be part of this equation. And to his credit, when he came in late January, early February, kept the Capitals in position where, again, they were flirting with first place in the division, and they still were into the final week of the regular season. And that was thanks largely to Vitek Vanacek, a relatively unknown commodity at the start of the year, but showed himself fairly well in terms of giving the Caps the opportunity to finish where they ultimately did in the standings. So that said, this is new territory, though. First time postseason NHL experience, of course. And I'll say with Vanacek, Alec, I'm curious to see what he does in the postseason. What I mean by that is I think he needs to still prove himself at this stage, to show some consistency. During the regular season, just the eye test, I'm not even talking numbers, just the eye test, Alec. Sometimes you need a big save. Sometimes there's turnovers in front of you. Sometimes there's unforced errors. You need to bail out your teammates. Tuukka Rask does that a lot in Boston. Barry Trotz used to say in Washington, the difference between a great goaltender and a good goaltender is the great goaltenders are erasers. They erase and they mask a lot of what takes place in front of them. Need to see a little bit more of that consistently from Vitek Vanacek. Capitals have been in opportunities this season where maybe the game is getting away from them. They're in penalty trouble, whatever it is. You need your goaltender to steal a period, steal a game. And I think they still need to see that a little bit more from Vitek Vanacek. No better time than the Stanley Cup playoffs to prove it, but we didn't see it with quite enough regularity, I'll say. They had to outscore a lot of opponents during the regular season, if you follow.
Yeah. So going into this series, it's going to be tough for both teams. Both teams are very physical. Both teams have very good top lines. Bruins obviously have the edge with the scoring depth right now. Obviously, health is a concern for the Capitals. There may be some line movements. We still got to wait and see what's up with Evgeny Kuznetsov. But, if the Capitals are going to win this series, whether it's 4 games, 7 games, whatever it is, what is the game plan for them to get past the Bruins?
Got to be physical. Got to be physical. You touched on it there. And I know the Boston Bruins, I know they have some size on their blue line. Carlo comes to mind, but it's not necessarily thought of as a big, heavy, intimidating blue line, especially a guy like Matt Grzelcyk on the smaller side. I know he could scoot. He could move the puck up ice and a terrific skater. But I think if there's an area the Capitals could potentially exploit, which they may need to exploit should they want to advance into the postseason, the second round, you gotta use that physicality. And Alec, that also means series could go the distance. And what the Capitals did very well in 2018 is games 1, 2, and 3, you just lay the foundation. And you reap the benefits the deeper the series goes, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. And every game, it's just every shift, it's just an investment. And the Capitals in 2018, they rallied in all 4 series. They were only the second Stanley Cup champion that had come back in all 4 rounds en route to a Stanley Cup final. And I'm not going to say that was by design, but it's not a coincidence that they were able to really, as the series went along, take advantage of the opposition more and more as they used that body. They had the opposition really feel it towards the end of each series in those instances. And I wouldn't be surprised if the game plan is very similar this go around.
See, it's clear by our conversation that it's going to be a physical series, but this is the first series. Say the Bruins or the Capitals get past the winner of the next round, go to the Final Four, have a shot at the Stanley Cup. The series are going to get more physical. They're going to be playing do you think this first round matchup for whoever gets past this is going to be at a disadvantage moving forward because of how beat up both are going to be?
It's going to be a black and blue series. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that holds true. Honestly, I think that holds true for whoever comes out of the East, because I think the Pittsburgh Islanders series, whoever comes out among these 4 teams, so you will have had to beat 2 of them on the way to the league semifinals. Could be a lot of ice bags. You're absolutely right. Whoever comes out of this could have a lot of wear and tear. I agree. Absolutely.
We'll talk about being big and physical. You guys signed the Bruins, almost one of the franchise, the guy who's been on the blue line for years this offseason. How do you think the Chara effect is going to mess with things in this series?
Well, I will say he has been, I don't want to say a pleasant surprise. He's come as advertised in Washington. He played 55 out of 56 games, and he's been a fixture on the back end, a leader in ice time in shorthanded situations on the penalty kill. So I know in Boston there was some thought if he was going to return, he was going to be in a quote-unquote reserve role, which is ironic because given how many injuries they ended up having, they certainly could have used him and he would have played a whole lot. But anyways, it's a whole other story. But as far as the difference and the impact that he can make in this series, there's been some narratives and storylines that, he knows the Bruins, he's familiar with them. These 2 teams played each other 8 times this regular season. I really don't think there's too many secrets between the 2 teams at this point and as they go along in this series. So I don't know that the familiarity breeds much. And you know what? To be honest, Alec, the way I had the opportunity a couple of months ago early in the year to really speak at length with Chara, and I get the sense, is he more motivated because it's Boston on the other side? I feel like he'd be motivated whoever he's playing. He just wants to keep going at this stage in his career, whether it's Boston, whether it's Pittsburgh, like I think it's a neat story and a neat coincidence that, all right, they have to go through each other, the Bruins facing Chara and all that. But I really think I don't think it's as big of a deal as maybe some naturally would like to make it out to be. I think he'd be just as motivated whoever he's playing. And regarding the familiarity, I think, like I said, eight games against each other. There aren't too many secrets between these two teams.
So it's going to be crazy because I'm so used to rooting for Chara. Now we're going into a potentially 7-game series where I'll be rooting against him the entire time. So the Bruins could have definitely used him this year. You talked about injuries on the Capitals side. That's been a problem with the Bruins as well, but more on the defensive end. I would have loved to see him in black and gold. You guys are pretty lucky to have the future Hall of Famer. Looking at this year, obviously, we mentioned it before with the series being physical. Do you like this? I mean, obviously, we knew the playoff format was going to be a little bit adjusted with COVID-19. What are your thoughts on the way that it's set up this year? Because it's clear some teams, like say Toronto, has a relatively easy route. Then you got our two teams. That's got a war for the first 2 rounds before things start getting even closer in the Final Four.
Yeah, I don't have too much of an issue with divisional play in general. I know over the past few years since 2014-15 when they realigned, they almost tried to get the best of both worlds where you had the divisional play, but then you also had the wild cards and then it was confusing, like who's playing who. I'm okay with it being next year they're going to return back to that format. But if it ever came to, 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, and this becomes a format moving forward, I have no issue with it, and I'm also in the minority, Alec, that I like all the matchups in the regular season. When the NHL came back from the 2006 lockout, and at the time there were 6 divisions, they were comprised of fewer teams, but you played within your division 8 times each, and some people felt that was a bit much, but you only played teams in the other conference like 1 time each. You didn't guarantee to see every team in every building, and I just love divisional play. I love the rivalries it creates, the storylines it creates. I don't care if there's some teams you don't see. I'll sacrifice that for more of the same. And again, I think I'm in the minority because I think folks generally like variety and like seeing everybody, but I'm all for divisional play and I'm all for it in the postseason if that's what it takes to get to a semifinal.
Yeah, I mean, seeing like the fact they can play the Rangers, the Caps, like all these teams they played this year, the rivalries, the intensity going into this series. Because like I told you before, like how physical they've seen them so many times. They've already basically played a series worth of games in the regular season, so it should be insane. Before we let you go, who do you have in your playoff start tomorrow? We'll leave this division out because we have.
Do I have to dust off a bracket here? I haven't really got to dust off the bracket. Yeah.
Who do you think outside of the East? So Canada, Central, West. How they're all. I think Canada's North. Who do you see as some teams that can make some noise here in the postseason?
Well, I'll tell you, the series I'm most looking forward to is Florida-Tampa Bay. I just think that'll be a whole lot of fun. But Tampa Bay, the fact that all of a sudden after the regular season, lo and behold, Nikita Kucherov is coming back and Steven Stamkos is coming back and the band is back together for the defending Stanley Cup champs. Funny how that works out when the salary cap gets thrown out the window come postseason time. I think Tampa Bay and having to go through Carolina in that Central Division, I think that'll be a whole lot of fun. And whoever ultimately comes from that division could be a team that bears watching. And then similarly, out West, whether it's Vegas, whether it's Colorado, those are 2 teams that both of them, have aspirations of deep runs and for good reason. The head scratcher to me, Alec, is that North Division. Toronto, I just, until they advance past the first round, which they've yet to do with this core, with Austin Matthews and company, they haven't won a series going back to 2004, the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I know they're a trendy pick. They're a fun watch, high octane offense, high talent. I'd put them a notch below some of those other contenders I referenced.
All right. Well, Ben, thank you very much for joining me and best of luck to your Capitals I think they'll go longer than a week in their series against the Bruins.
Yeah, it should be fun. Really looking forward to this. Thank you, Alec.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of the Alec Walt Show. I'm your host, Alec Walt, alongside Ben Raby. What do you guys think of the series that starts tomorrow between the Capitals and the Bruins? Feel free to comment that below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Down the Block Sports for more of my exclusive content. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and go Bruins.